Hi. I hope you've been enjoying the challenge of trying to define mindfulness, at least as much as you know about it so far. You may find that you never quite can pin down a definition of mindfulness, and that's because the idea is a little elusive and very internal as a process. But that's okay, as long as you're not trying to research it, which is when defining mindfulness becomes much more important to kind of coming up with a consensus definition that you can observe and measure. As long as you're more on the practitioner side of things, or kind of doing things that are generally accepted as mindfulness practices, it's okay if your definition remains just a little bit fuzzy. So one of the things that comes up, or I've noticed comes up when I read about mindfulness and what it is or how people define it, is this idea or question of whether mindfulness is a state or a trait. So I wanted to pause and just give you a thumbnail sketch of the understanding of the distinction between those two ideas, state versus trait. In the world of psychology, this gets discussed a lot with certain emotions, but I don't know whether in the world of education it gets talked about a whole lot. So in a nutshell, a state is more of a temporary, there's sort of a limited time span during which you're feeling something, whereas a trait is sort of an identity or an identifying characteristic of yourself. And I think it helps to define these by giving a couple of brief examples. So, if I am getting up to perform, this is personal by the way, to sing in front of people, I'm likely to experience some very, very acute anxiety, much akin to a panic attack. If that happens, that's a state. But if I'm a chronically anxious person, always worried, always stressed out, then that becomes more of a trait. Another example is if someone almost causes a wreck while I'm driving, then I'm going to be very angry, but that's temporary and that's caused by something external. However, if I tend to be someone who's easy to set off all the time, then that's more of a trait like anger. On the flip side of that, sort of more positively valenced, I might have an experience that causes me a moment of real bliss. It could be seeing my children perform, it could be getting a neck rub. These things would give me a temporary sense of happiness, but if I'm an upbeat person most of the time, then that's more of a trait. So the same question comes up when people are trying to define mindfulness. And we're going to explore this a little bit more, but some people say it's a state and it's provoked by mindfulness practices. So while you're doing those practices, or for a short time after doing those practices, you're in more of a state of mindfulness. Whereas other people say, well, some people are just generally mindful, and or long-time practitioners of mindfulness practices are kind of permanently mindful. It becomes a trait. So let's explore that just a little bit more and see what some people think with some selections from some readings that I dug up. And we'll talk about it together a little bit and see what we think.